We do all kinds of things here at Word in Your Ear.
Videocasts like this.
Podcasts like this.
Crowdcast events with famous authors.
Live quizzes.
And we can guarantee to make your next birthday one you'll never forget.
There's only one way to guarantee getting all of this, to getting it before anybody else, and that's to sign on to be a supporter on Patreon.
Full details at this address.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Welcome to another Word in Your Attic. Now, very few people can claim to have booked King Crimson for 15 quid or encourage Peter Gabriel to wear a fox's head on stage. And we have finally found a man who did both. An old pal of ours who went on to pretty much run the music industry. Please welcome aboard Paul Conroy. Paul.
Hello, Paul.
You. Fantastic.
Gentlemen,
how are you?
It's a
And
pleasure.
this is Henley-on-Thames, isn't it? I think we're talking to you in.
Henley-on-Thames, the Royal Borough of.
Of course, yes.
Is it full of rock stars, Henley-on-Thames? Because obviously it's where George Harrison used to live, isn't it?
My very good friend Carol Decker,
Right.
up the road,
from the
Tapal, who has still never forgiven me for dropping her in the days of Virgin, and reminds me every time after about the third glass. Yes, yes. George was just up the road, yeah, there's quite a few. Mr. Tumble is round here.
The what?
Mr. Tumble?
Mr. Tumble, he was a TV personality like you two were, but he does children's television. You know.
God, I've never heard of him. That's terrible.
Well, it's not your age group, Mark, is it?
No. Well, absolutely star-packed. Sensational. Yeah. That's great.
Oh,
and how
I
has
tell you who
lockdown
is here
been?
as
Go on.
well. Mr. Hick from the Hollies.
Oh,
right.
Tony Hicks.
Tony Hicks, who I see in Waitrose and desperate to talk to him, but, you don't know what to say, really. And, I don't know. And I see him in Waitrose. Oh, Joe Brown lives local. Don't start me off because there's loads.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay, fair enough. So how have you been getting on over the last, however long it's been, Paul? Have you been going through your possessions like everybody does and thinking, why have I got 10 copies of this? And whatever happened to so-and-so? Do you do any of that?
Well, for the last 4 years, I've been living in Gozo, which is Malta. And I only recently returned. And so I've come back home to do things like check life insurance policies and all that sort of thing. Now, I lived there for some time. I had a great 4 years in Gozo, but I've now returned to my roots here in Henley because of the virus, because of various things. And my wife couldn't get out. My daughter couldn't get out. Old chums couldn't get out, so it just became a bit ridiculous.
You and Billy Connolly, he lives in Gozo. We certainly did. We went out there once for a holiday. I remember being overtaken by him in a Jeep. So, yeah.
He lived literally just up the road from me. And I saw him in a restaurant not long ago. And I saw this guy sat in front of me in a better Hawaiian shirt than me and went up and as I looked at him, I could see it was Billy. So I just had a few words with him and things. But yeah, no, he's had a house there for a long, long time.
Yeah. Right. Well, have you got... Actually, we should start, Dave, shouldn't we, with the traditional question.
Oh, yes.
About your... We asked people what music playing device they remember in their house as a child, their parents, in the family house when you were growing up. Do you remember what was playing the music?
Yes, one of those great wooden sort of effigies that we bought in Bentall's in Kingston.
Radiogram.
And my dad had a collection of 78s.
Oh, right.
And I think the only vinyl album we had was South Pacific or something like that. So that was my listening to records goes back to Bentall's again, where I used to go into the booths and you'd go up to the counter and say, can you play so-and-so and so-and-so? And after about the fifth time and you're not buying anything, they say, get out of here, and all that sort of thing. But that was listening to records for me in the early days, until I got my Dan's set, of course,
right.
Which I had to take to my room because my parents were there. Whenever that noise,
Yeah. Well, they were supposed to be portable, weren't they? They had a carrying handle, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I had a red and white one, if I remember rightly.
They tended to be they tended to be the same color schemes as ice lollies, in my memory. They were like specialized lollies. What was the
My
first?
my mum and dad, my father forbade us from playing our pop records, me and my sisters, on his record player because he said it damaged the stylus. That's a brilliant
Yes,
ruse, isn't it?
That's a good one.
That's
Yes.
clever. So we had to get our own dance sets and things. Can you remember the first? How long you still got the first record you ever bought?
No, the first record I bought was Hush, 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 Here Comes the Bogeyman. And it was a double A-side with the Teddy Bears Picnic.
Hey!
Oh, brilliant. That's good.
And it was by Henry Hall.
There you go.
Hush, 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 here comes the Bogeyman. He'll catch you if he can.
Teddy
Look out,
Bears Picnic.
He's got a little dog. You know, anyway. Sorry.
Dave and I are obsessed with the Teddy Bears Picnic.
I love the Teddy Bears
unbelievably spooky and unsettling tune.
Brilliant record. Brilliant record. So, what was the first LP you bought? Can you remember that?
Yes, it was Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Oh, really? Oh, right.
I mean, because
Got aged what? How old would you have been?
34. No, you see, I bought singles because you'd have that stacker, didn't you?
Yeah.
On you. And, I wasn't like you boys. I lived on the other side of the tracks, so I could only afford, 6 and 11 or something for singles. So I bought every Shadows single, and I've got the Shadows last single that I bought, which was, I've got Foot Tapper here and things. Because I was a boy, and boys found a bit awkward about buying songs with love and things in it because it was a bit pansy-ish. So, but I stopped buying the Shadows at Little Princess. Beyond that, I didn't go. And there's Little Princess, and there's Foot Tapper. But I loved instrumentals, and so I bought Telstar and all those sort of things.
Pictures.
And then I braved out and I bought See Emily Play. I think it was. Excuse the sleeve because it's been at parties and things like that.
It's the wrong sleeve. Yes.
Yeah. Well, you would do, you techos and things, So that See Emily Play was the Floyd was definitely a big turning point in my life.
So, how did you get into the music business?
I'd like to show you this first before I do.
Yeah, go and show us. What's this? Your rugby team?
Yes, under 12s. Under 12s at school.
Right.
Is that a vicar in the middle? It's like a man in a dog collar.
Excuse me, it's a priest. I was a
priest.
Catholic boy.
Okay.
No, I went to school with Bill Nye, who you should get on. He was a big Rolling Stones fan. But Bill was in the same rugby team and same.
So is he in that picture? He obviously is. Yes. Point him out.
He is in the middle, the good-looking one. There. You see?
Oh, yeah. Above the priest.
Anyway, so he's still been he's a pal of mine for many years. What got me into the music business? Not being able to do anything else, I think, really. I went to John Fisher School in Pele. I left with a miserable 5 O-levels and had to go and do my A-levels at Ule Tech, as people used to do. And it was a great breeding ground for people who were a little bit woo and a little bit way. So I went to Ule Tech and I became the social secretary on the Students' Union. And my first booking was The Nice and Elmer Gantry's Velvet Opera. I mean,
what year are we talking about here? 67?
68, I think.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
They'd had dances before at Ule, but they never really had concerts. Do you remember when instead of dances, people would sit on the floor?
Sit on wooden floors, smoking roll-ups.
And so I had The Nice and Elmer Gantry's Velvet Opera, and I booked The Nice for 175 quid. And the sort of America was raging then, and John Peel was playing it all the time. And it was a fab piece of booking. The place was completely overwhelmed. There were kids on the roof. There was everything. And of course, the awkward thing was my dad was the head of police in Epsom. And he said, if I ever catch you doing anything wrong or smoking any of them reefers or anything like that, I'll march you straight down the station. But I remember my first meeting of Tony Stratton Smith was him banging on the doors, trying to get in. because the place was like, amazing. It was an amazing night anyway. And there was Keith Emerson sticking his daggers in on this rickety old stage, and I think they'd just come from the Albert Hall where they burnt the American flag.
Yes.
Yeah. But the second gig I had at Ewell was this. And excuse the poster, but I designed it myself.
You designed that? I knew Yardbirds, who were about to change their name.
Well, that on the Friday night before the gig, I got a call from, I think, Mike Dolan, who went on to manage the Eurythmics and the Straubs and one thing or another, who was an agent then at Terry King Associates. And he rang me up and he said, I've got to tell you, they've changed their name. They're now called Led Zeppelin. So I had to go around with my marker pen, ruining my fabulous posters. And that was Led Zeppelin.
What did you pay for them? Can you remember?
Oh, about the same. I never went beyond 175. I don't know why. It's a magic number.
Fantastic.
So the day of the gig, we're all setting up and the roadies come down and there's at the door and it's Jimmy Page. And he said, I hope you don't mind, I've come down a bit early. I could sit in the the dressing room or something like that. And I remember he had an Asimov novel he was reading, and he said he'd come down to see his mum, who was a dental receptionist in Epsom. And in fact, it was only many years later that I found out that he was in bands with Jeff Beck I think he went to Ewell Castle School, and he'd lived in Ewell for quite a few years. And that's where he started his rock and roll career, actually in Ewell. But I didn't know that at the time.
All right. So give us an idea. When Led Zeppelin turned up to play Ewell Tech in 1968, having just changed the name, what kind of equipment did they bring with them? And, how big a production was it?
Well, we played, the gigs were all in a refectory, which you've got to imagine had quite a low set. So there was no, there was no Charlie Watkins, there was no Wham It's Wham columns in there. It was, it was how John Bonham dealt with sitting on the back on a one of those things that you couldn't nail him to the floor, for instance, because it was that horrible stuff you put up to make stages, for people just to get on. It wasn't a solid stage or anything, so it would rattle around and things. And with him hitting the drums, interestingly, Robert had been there before because we booked him as Robert Plant in the Band of Joy as well earlier. So.
Well, am I right in thinking that Ewell Tech was where Queen played their first gig?
Well, that was after my time. I've got Queen stories, don't worry.
All right,
don't jump the gun.
We're in your hands. Go on. Move us forward. Oh, God.
Oh, Lord, yes. Amazing. Oh, that's the 15 quid, presumably, is it? Yeah. Supporting Bob Kerr's Whoopee band. That's a brilliant idea.
I love Bob Kerr.
Oh, they were. Bob Kerr? Oh, I did. Yeah. Didn't they occasionally have little thought bubbles and speech bubbles and stuff like that? The Bonzos.
There was a lot of interaction between them and the Bonzos and things. And Vernon Dudley, Bohey No, I think. Yeah. But they used to always start with a dustbin exploding.
That's it.
They go na 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 na, and this dustbin would blow up. And they said, "We like to start the show with a good bang."
Cherry bombs would go off. That's right. Oh, that's fantastic.
But I was rung up by I think it was Ian Smithers at Marquis Martin, and he said, "Look, we've got this band who are getting it together in the country, and they want to play some gigs." And he said, "Have you got any space?" I said, "Well, I've got 2 bands already. I can't really get 3." And we used to have to finish at 10:30, of course, So I said, "All right, well, they can come down." Well, King Crimson came down, and on that particular night, I'd had Sharon Tandy and the Fleur de Lis booked, and they cancelled. And I'd got Keef Hartley. Now, Keef Hartley was going through his half-breed Indian period. And King Crimson came down, and talking about equipment, they had the creme de la creme, right? They came down with about a cast of 40, including the living jukebox Andy Dunkley. And they set up, And my best pal, who's always been my best pal, and we worked out we've known each other for 53 years, who was at Yule with me, Chris Briggs, he went and sat with the band all outside in the field. Well, I had to hump all the bloody gear in and things. But they were amazing. And they wanted to rehearse all afternoon. So I got permission for them to rehearse all afternoon. And as they were rehearsing, Keef Hartley came in and he heard the sound of the melody. He had an Alsatian dog, you know, and one of those fringe jackets that we all wanted, like Roger Daltrey. Yes. And the old cowboy hat with a feather in it, right?
And he came from Lancashire, didn't he? I think I'm correct to say.
He was open-mouthed, I can tell you. I mean, because the sound was just like, you know, the King Crimson sound was like, what the hell's going on here? Anyway, that was it. But they brought their own posters as well and put them all up, which went in about 5 minutes. You know, it was the first time you'd seen a band sort of like really organised like that. And of course, David Endhoven and Johnny Gaydon came down, and you know.
Yeah, that was a turning point, wasn't it? Really.
Yeah. And that was the next one.
Fantastic. 11 shillings.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
Junior's Eyes. I really like Junior's Eyes.
Remind me about Junior's Eyes.
I don't remember them at all.
Were they on Transatlantic or something like that?
I think they were.
Junior? I think they might have been.
They joined the ranks of Blossom Toes and bands like that that I really, really liked around that time.
So like the Giddy Heights of Blossom Toes. That's great.
But of course, that was the biggest band in the area, wasn't it?
I must have missed them, Paul. I must have missed the Pete Frame family tree that they figured on. Tell us about them.
That was my band. That was my band, and I used to sing and do a fair old Robert Plant impersonation.
Can you remember any of your song titles? It's always a giveaway.
Oh yeah, no, we used to do this voyage around the world. I don't know where it came from, but we did, you know, Communications Breakdown, and we did songs like that. And of course, I did my Roger Chapman impersonation as well. So that was lay down easy in my own time. Thank you.
Oh,
we haven't had many Roger Chapman impersonators.
No,
sadly lacking. I can smell the patchouli oil from here in this conversation. Carry on.
But that was Yule. But this was where I cut my teeth, of course.
All right.
Can you see that?
Well, it's the Toby Jug Blues Club in Tolworth in Surrey. Is that right?
Right.
With the Taste Family, Jethro Tull, Chicken Shack. As a promoter, what were you doing there?
Standing outside in my greatcoat.
Oh, right, okay.
And that was we still haven't had why guy got into the business, but we're getting there. That was run by a guy called Len Fletcher, who promoted the Black Prince in Bexley as well. And he was quite a remarkable guy, old school promoter, you know, there was no guest list or anything like that. And when he used to always introduce the bands, and as he was introducing the bands, he'd go, you know, tonight we've got, and he was counting the crowd, wasn't he? Because he thought he was being diddled on the door by he was a great character. But I went from Yule, I got my A levels, but I didn't get enough to get to university. So I was going to I thought, well, I can design posters. And I was going to go to Leicester College of Printing. And my best pal, Chris Briggs, was going to Leicester University. So I thought, well, that's great, because we can hang up there and I can be all art schooly or whatever. I got to Leicester College of Printing, and the lecturer put me off because he said, none of you will have jobs in a few years' time. So I sort of sod that. So I left. I'd gone to my local pub the week before and we'd all said a big goodbye. And then I was back the following Friday night. And then I went to, I thought, well, I'll do teachers training. So I went to Newman College, Birmingham, to do teachers training. And up there, I met a guy who, I put bands on there. I had Tea and Symphony on, and I had Caravan, more of them later, because Caravan had featured all the way through that, because they were the main band I came into the music business for. I knew we'd get there in the end, you know.
Okay.
But I put them on again. But I met a guy up there who was from St Helens, and he was very pally with two guys who were in Smile. this band Smile. And he told me all about them. And that's when I first got to meet Queen. I met Roger and Freddie in Kenny Market with him when they had their stall. And I left Teachers Training College after a year because the headmaster told me my hair was too long. But I taught in Handsworth Wood in Birmingham. It was a real tough area. And most of my kids were brought back to I used to take them out and play rounders with them to tire them out. And most of the kids were brought back after lunch because they'd been in Birmingham tea leafing and things. In Rackham's, I think, was the big store in Birmingham. So
good preparation for the music industry, this, by the way.
But it was great, Birmingham, because I used to go to Mother's a lot. I saw one of Traffic's early gigs there. But this friend of mine, Ken Testy, told me about Queen, and we got quite pally. And so anyway, eventually I left and I thought, what the hell am I going to do? And I was offered a gig as an agent at Terry King Associates. They had the Fortunes, the Foundations, the Straubs, Lindisfarne, Van der Graaf, Genesis, and Caravan. But it was Caravan who persuaded me because I got very friendly, as all of us did from Yule, because they were just such great guys from Canterbury. And we used to go and stay down there in Canterbury and blah-de-blah-de-blah. But I started on £17 a week as a booker agent. So I sat there with my NUS book and I had to ring colleges. And if you remember in those days, of course, you're not old enough to remember these things.
I do.
If you sat in the common room playing cards or drinking horrible coffee, and they'd have the phone on the wall.
Yes.
You know? So some bastard would pick up. Sorry, can't I say that? Someone would pick up the phone. Someone would pick up the phone and say, "Hello." And you say, "Oh, hello, it's Paul Conroy from Terry King Associates. Is the social secretary around?" And things like that. And I say, "No, he's not. Bugger off." You know. So you think, oh, I got to ring again in a couple of hours. It was bloody hard work, I can tell you. But I went out on the road with loads of bands, and that's where I cut my teeth going out on the road and finding out really how hard it was on the road.
Right.
But I got very friendly with all the bands. And it was around that time that actually it was probably slightly later when I'd gone from Terry King Associates to Charisma Artists. We started Charisma as an agency. And it was around that sort of time that I went to Imperial College because that's where they were doing the auditions for a bass player. And that's when John Deacon came into the band. Okay. And I put them on various gigs. Yule probably was one of them. But so I went, they did their first demos, which I can remember breaking Great King Rap was on it. I was always worried that Freddie, though, was never going to make it as a singer. Not because Freddie and Roger, and all of them were so driven. But he had very buck teeth.
Yeah.
And he sang with a lisp. And so I thought, you know, maybe they can do something in the studio or whatever. But in the very early demos, you can hear that. I think he got his teeth fixed in later life. But I took them in the early demos and introduced them to Tony Stratton-Smith. And Gail Coulson can't quite remember this. She thinks that Strat did want to sign them. But I remember Strat saying to me, "I'm not sure about them, Connors. They've got a bit of an attitude, haven't they?" and of course, we had at that time, and I've been guilty of this as well, we did have Genesis, we did have Van der Graaf, we did have other acts, you know, and Lindisfarne that, you know, we needed to break. And I don't think there was really any room on the roster. But Gail tells a different story and says Strat was interested in them, but eventually they signed to EMI via Trident Studios, and the rest is history. So,
right, all right. You talk about, you've dealt with a lot of bands. You talk about Queen had that drive from early on. Is that one of the, can you spot that quite early on with bands?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Genesis were Genesis, who were nice public school boys until Phil Collins came in. And Phil, I think one of your previous things, some bloke called Glenn Colson might have said this to you, but he was extremely driven. I mean, I always say he'd get up in the middle of the night to go and do a session at a studio or something like that. And Glenn, I think I saw Glenn's, and he's told the story about him and Chris Welsh I mean, my story about Phil is he eventually got his first flat in Epsom, and I remember him moving in, and he didn't have a toilet seat, and my parents had a spare one, as you did, hanging on the garage wall, and we gave him his first toilet seat. He's never repaid me for that either. It was a very nice one. It was a wooden one, you know.
But Queen had that from early on.
Oh. Have you seen Bohemian Rhapsody? Presumably you have, because I wondered if you thought it was remotely accurate, the suggestion of their characters and the way they presented themselves.
I thought he was remarkable, absolutely remarkable as Freddie. I thought he did a brilliant job. I mean, you know, you've probably got the same feelings as me. Most rock films are absolutely dire. My favourite rock film, which moving on to Jake Riviera, took me to see, and I've got it on CD and I love it, is Payday. Have you ever seen that film with Rip Torn?
No.
Oh
Never
my
even heard of
God.
it.
Oh, you guys would absolutely love it. Rip Torn is sensational. He's a country singer called Maury Dan in it. And the best part of the film is when he takes some old grouse into a radio station, and he said, and the guy says, "Hey, Maury, nice to see you. You know, we play all your records, don't you, of course?" And he says, "Oh, thank you for bringing me some game birds in." And it was an old grouse whiskey. Brilliant. It's a sensational film.
I've never heard of it. I'll look
I'll
look that out. So what happened to you? You started working for a Charisma agency. You moved from Terry King to Charisma.
Yes.
Give us an idea of what bands were going out for in those days and how touring was organized, because it wasn't like, here's the new album and then we're doing a tour to support it. It was different form of gigging, wasn't it?
Well, everything was haphazard in those days, you know. I mean, you didn't have plans to do things, you know. Bands were as far away from record companies until the smaller record labels came along. You know, you signed to CBS or whatever it was, Columbia then, or you signed to Polygram. Yeah. And, you know, you've rarely had an interaction with the label as such. But, you know, no, I was booking Quaint Ways Chester, or I booked a club called Clarence's Halifax for a long time, which is no longer, none of these clubs are there. The Van Dyke Club, Plymouth, Penthouse Scarborough, Coat and Bowl Redcar.
Oh God, I've done that one for
I can
West Runton Pavilion.
West Runton Pavilion. Let's hear it. That's where the tours all started, wasn't it?
That's come up many times, because I think it started there because it was such a long way for the press to get there that they never reviewed the first gig. That was the great advantage, wasn't it?
In those days, when you used to drive to gigs, and it happened all the time, you'd think, how much longer till you get there? West Runton was one of those gigs. Well, I booked Genesis at one point. They were doing, I don't know, Middlesbrough or somewhere like that. And the next night they were somewhere up else in the northeast. And so a phone box call comes into me at the agency. It's like, you know, put some more money in, put some more money. And it was Mike Rutherford to say, Paul, the gig on the Saturday night has been cancelled. And I was like, oh my Lord, I've sent them all the way up there. They were not pleased. They were not pleased. They did the Friday night, but the Saturday had gone, you know. So.
Oh, right. But how much money were bands? I mean, Genesis always had a bit of a following. So, I mean, how much were they going out for, all these groups in that time?
Blimey. 200 or 300, something maybe like that.
Okay.
I mean, I started with Lindisfarne. I mean, I'm as proud about Lindisfarne as anyone else. I started them on 15 quid a night, you know, like Crimson, doing, and then the time I stopped being their agent was they were doing Crystal Palace Bowl for Harvey, you know, so that was it.
It was started, but you would be putting bands out £15.
Well, if you felt, you know, I mean, when Elvis Costello played, I'm moving on a bit.
Yeah.
When Elvis Costello played at the Nashville Rooms, we booked this band called Dire Straits as support. And we were paying them 15 quid. And I don't know, I mean, they must have done 2 numbers, but they were on for 25 minutes. And Jake Riviera said to me, he said, go and give them the money. Here's a tenner. Knock them. And I went in. And and I don't think Mark, like musicians have very long memories. Very long memories. And I don't think Mark Knopfler's ever forgiven me. So, Mark, can I say, if you give me your home address, I'll send you that five. To make up. But they were completely gobsmacked, that someone would knock them for a five.
God, and this would have been 1977. That's so little money, isn't it? A tenner.
Well, yeah. It was a very cheap business in those days, wasn't it? All the way around.
But then,
go on.
But Charisma, we did these tours, which I compared.
Oh, you were the DJ, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I did some, and then we had a professional with Andy Dunkley who came and did the big ones. Right. I got Newcastle Town Hall or Birmingham Town Hall, and he'd do the Lyceum or the big ones. And there's me with Genesis.
Yes,
in Italy, because we did lots of tours of Italy in those days. There's me on the end with rather not a fetching tash, I think. There.
That's great.
Yeah. But yeah, we toured Italy a lot in those days. So, Van der Graaf and Genesis particularly, and we had lots of fun. And I wouldn't go on the road with them. I had lots of fun, of course.
What?
An Andy Murray special, that one.
It looks like Charles Murray there.
Yeah, Peter Wingard. Yeah.
And we go to Italy and we drive all the way out there, and Italy was like the Wild West of gigs, because there were the great stories about Uriah Heep. They didn't have any humpers come to the gig, and they said to the promoter, well, we're off then. We're not going to stop if you haven't got them. And they shot he shot the tyres off the truck, didn't he? And that got back to the marquee, and it probably wasn't anything like that. But by the time it got back to the marquee bar, they were strung up, they were done. So people say, you don't need to go to Italy, do you? It's like, out there, it's the Wild West of gigs. But my first gig in Italy with Van der Graaf, and they'd got quite a following, was at the Theatre Massimo in Milan. And the promoter, Maurizio Salvadori, said to me, it might get a bit, wild out here. And I'm like, really? So there I am with my silver roadies briefcase. I've come to collect the money and look after the band. And the gig goes on, and he says, come up onto the roof. And there were like nihilists, anarchists, all rioting outside. It was like, with rockets going off, fireworks. It was almost as exciting as the gig,
So and that was caused by Van der Graaf generator, that right?
Oh, I don't know. Well, lots of things happened.
It was just that's what was happened to be going on the night they were playing. Right.
Where are you going tonight? I think I'm going to a Van der Graaf. Cause mayhem.
Yeah. So tell us about you. You ended up managing the Kursaal Flyers, didn't you?
I did, but hang on. Let's room for another picture.
Go on.
There's me as an agent, you see. Look, two photos.
Classic.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's great. Very exciting.
But what happened at Charisma, we had all sorts of acts. My greatest triumph was when Strat came into my office one day and said, Connors, we're going out to lunch with Sir John Betjeman. And I went to the Gay Hussar with Strat and Sir John Betjeman, who had terrible dandruff, poor old thing, I've got my memory of Sir John is like, he wanted to go, like, when you see people who've got really bad dandruff, you think, I've tried everything myself. I don't know how to get rid of it. But we went to the Gay Hussar. We were trying to get Sir John Betjeman, believe it or not, on the road with the Barrow Poets and do a tour, because he made the albums for Charisma, which were really good albums.
Yeah.
But what happened at Charisma, I started meeting Jake and becoming Chilli Willi's agent.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I that was my first meeting with Jake, who'd come into managing Chilli Willi from being the tour manager for Daryl Way's Wolf. That's a little known fact, isn't it? He'll murder me for that. because he spoke fluent French, so Daryl Way had been quite big in France for some.
God, all kinds of secrets.
These are whole new depths of rock obscurity.
I know, yeah.
Fantastic.
This is good.
Daryl Way's Wolf
Could
first
dine
mentioned.
out on these.
No, this is great.
We've had a sentence that contained both Chilli, Willi and the Red Hot Peppers, Daryl Way's Wolf. I feel we've entered a new dimension in the history of these.
We'll use that as the trail.
I was Chilli Willi's agent, and then I had
Killed in the Pirates.
I had Charlie Gillett and Gordon Nelke, the acid dentist, come to see me, and they were managing the Kilburns when they first started. So that was my first introduction to Ian, and I loved the Kilburns. I mean, they were, to me, in fact, one of my records, which I was going to show you, is here, of course, which is.
Oh, you're holding up a copy of The Thoughts of Emilis Daviak by.
Wait, that's late.
Sorry, I've blown your
it
chronology. Dear, oh dear.
That was produced by Hugh Murphy. Unfortunately, the songs I don't think ever came across the way that they should do on that record.
And it was on Pie, which was never a good start at all.
No. But then I became the Feel Goods agent as well, and became Pele with Chris Fennick and all that.
Oh, the Naughty Rhythms tour, was it right? Kokomo and all. Yeah, that's right.
The Naughty Rhythms tour. Hang on, where have I've got my poster somewhere, but we're probably running out of time, aren't we?
No, carry on.
Go on, carry on.
So yes, we did the Naughty Rhythms tour, which was great fun, and I then was introduced to the Kursaals by Pete Thomas and Jake at the Kensington. I'm sure a watering hole that you frequented over the years. And yes, I went on to manage the Kursaal Flyers, who we see here at the Roundhouse at a
CBS gig.
A CBS convention.
And I'm going to tell you who else played, Paul, because I was there.
Right.
David Essex played that night.
He did.
And the Kursaal Flyers took the stage, and Paul Shuttleworth said, I'm wearing my BBC suit, small checks.
Small checks. That's right, the whole gang, that's right.
They are from Southend.
I remember it fondly many years later.
And who else was on that bill?
I can't remember. Go on, you're about to tell me. Go on.
I think Tina Charles might have done it.
Oh. Well,
no, because they were showcasing British acts, hopefully, to the... And the other one was Southern Brothers and Quiver.
Oh, were they on that? Okay.
Who left Ireland by then.
Yeah.
And were managed by the very nice Keith Reid and Nick Blackburn in those days.
Right. Good group, Southern Brothers and Quiver.
But if you look at this picture closely, these guys were all at the at that event. Same. If they'd known you were there, Dave, they would have really wanted to have taken you backstage.
Is that Walter Yetnikoff and so forth?
Well, that's it. That's Bruce Lundvall.
Yes.
Walter Yetnikoff, who you could fill 50 programs on. Maurice Oberstein.
Yes.
Dick Asher. And Ron Alexenberg, who I think went to run MCA in America. But these guys were the guys, you know.
They were the big wheels, weren't they?
These boys you could write books on until the cows came home. You know. So,
amazing.
So yes, I managed the Kursaals. We did a fabulous documentary with Mark Cadell, which got 90 minutes on BBC Two. And then
which kind of got them a hit, didn't it? There was that one got them on
Little Does She Know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you've spoken to Will, so you've had more depth and everything on the Kursaals. But then we toured with the Flying Burrito Brothers, and then we had this night, of course.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah.
But look at the bottom of the bill.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was that night really that sort of said, "Hang on, the times they are changing." You know? And I left. I was going to go back and be a manure student, and I had an offer to go to Exeter University to read American Studies, which I thought was quite groovy. You know, American Studies. What do you do? I'm reading American Studies. And then I got a call from Jake saying, you know, we just started Stiff Records. Will you come and, you know, control the mayhem sort of thing? While Dave, because Jake and Dave Robinson were out on the road and everything, and I became the general manager and the one to sort of hold the fort. And they took me to the Newborn Cafe in Westbourne Grove and treated me to a fry-up. And Jake, I loved and always have done and always will do. Dave, I was always a little bit, he was the slippery Irishman who I grew to love over the years, but he always wanted to try and record the Kursaals at the Hope and Anchor, and get tapes of groups so he could bang them out in some shape or form. So, sorry, that's...
You must have enjoyed your time at Stiff.
Fantastic. It was, yes. I mean, I've got my, I've still got my Stiff tour jacket here. Remember tour jackets?
Oh, God, look at that.
So you were there before Elvis Costello broke, as it were. You were there with all that.
Around about the same time.
How do you arrive by then?
Well, I was there at about by 4 or 5. There'd been 4 or 5 singles that came out.
Yeah.
And I remember I shared a flat with Cynthia Lowell, who went on to work at Polydor, a video producer. And we had a payphone on the wall there. And Jake rang me up. We were just about to launch Elvis. And it was when Elvis Presley died.
Yeah.
And I had Terry the Pill out, just about to go out and fly post Elvis who? Elvis question mark. And Jake said, we can't do it now. We're going to have to wait at least a few weeks or something before we do that. But yeah, no, I was there with Elvis. We did all the early gigs. We did the Nashville rooms. We did all those sort of things. And then back again to the CBS Convention.
That's right.
It was outside Park Lane.
Which was the front,
outside, wasn't he?
Which was the front page of Melody Maker. And basically what we did in typical Stiff fashion, other than I had to get Elvis out of West End Central Police Station, because having prior knowledge of the police, you see, I could go in and I'd say,
like my dad.
My dad's the chief inspector in Epsom, he's a good lad, and he said, go on, move along, take him out of here. So I had to get Elvis out of the cells, sort of thing. But we came.
So
back.
he was arrested for busking outside the.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't know he was arrested. How incredible!
Cosmo,
what a great story.
Cosmo walked up and down with a sandwich boards and things.
Yeah.
And we all stood outside, and Elvis played. And you've got to imagine this was out Park Lane, Hilton. So there were people from all around the globe going in and out, thinking, what the hell's going on here? And Jake went and sort of made sure that as many Sony executives or CBS executives in those days came down and saw Elvis. And then what we did was, when the first album came out, we pumped loads. Sold all Miami's True cheap into America via Pacific Records, so that everyone in America thought, my God, this record is really hot, because you could find it everywhere in Bleecker Bob's, whatever, it was there. And so we built up this much bigger following that Elvis would have in America that's how he got his deal with Sony. So.
Yeah. Well, what was your next job after Stiff?
My next job after Stiff was basically I was on a coach with Elena Lovitch going up to Loughborough University. We took a coach up, as one did, a jolly. You remember jollies? Yeah. Used to take journalists who seemed to always want just to go out on a jolly and get drunk.
And never write anything.
Yeah. No, you'd see it back in the back section by Loon Pants. You'd have live, wouldn't you, in sound.
That's right.
So I'm on the coach and we're going to Loughborough. And I really have to work hard at these things, but I was on the old, and as we come into Loughborough, on the left-hand side, we see and Rob Dickens was on the bus, and he then offered me a job as the marketing director at WEA Records. Right. And as I was only on 30 quid a week, after 7 years, I left Stiff and I went to WEA.
And who were you working with there?
Oh, he struggles to look at his list here. Well,
what year are we talking about? It's the late 70s, right?
80s, early 80s. Yeah.
Paul Simon, AC/DC.
Paul Simon, ZZ Top, Guns N' Roses, Van Halen, Randy Newman, Lou Reed, Madonna, George Benson, Tracy Chapman, Cars, Foreigner.
So there you're dealing with the kind of the top level of kind of transatlantic.
Well, it was everything in my life has been a learning curve.
Right.
And the sad thing about nowadays is you can't make mistakes, can you? You know,
No.
It's a bit like poor old Frank Lampard who probably gets sacked at Chelsea because you if you make a mistake now, you're brown bread, aren't you? So I was able to cut my teeth on doing things, and and I knew people. So I'd suddenly become a marketing director, and at WEA I remember we had a big white chief, and he said to me one day, Paul, he had a spreadsheet. He said, you've got 90 left in the budget for the next month. Will that do you? And I said, oh, yes, I think that'll do it. I didn't know it was 90 pence, 90 pounds. It was 90,000 pounds, budget left. And Rob Dickens said to me afterwards, you handled that quite well because you didn't know what the hell he was talking about. But no, I mean, but it was fantastic because it was another step up. I was marketing director. I had shag pile carpet on the floor and all the things I never had, cuts without cracks, secretaries, expense accounts.
So who of those big acts did you personally, who impressed you or surprised you most? Because you must have been thrown in with all these people.
Well, Madonna is the great story.
But you were there when she arrived, presumably.
Yeah, pretty much so, yeah.
Which was around 81, yeah.
My wife at that time worked for Seymour Stein, and we'd got married in New York. There's a great story about how Knocker Knowles threw the wedding cake out the window, but that's for another day. But yes, Madonna came, and we had to launch Madonna. But Roger Ames at London, Seymour would play games. He'd always say, I've got this new act and da-da-da-da-da-da,
yeah.
And if you're not going to put it out, I'll take it to Roger Ames, right? So every Tuesday night, we used to have a session where we would play records to decide whether they should be released. Because you've got to imagine with WEA, you had Warner's, Elektra, Atlantic, all these labels putting records out, and you had to decide whether you thought there was a market for them in the UK. And Phil Strait, who did international at that time, used to collect all these records. And Tuesday evening, we'd have a curry night or whatever. We'd play all the records, then we'd go out for a Chinese or a curry or something like that afterwards. And Phil brought the first Madonna single out, and he'd left it by his radiator. So it was like, we put the record on, and it was like, and Rob said, we've got to put it out because we don't want Roger Ames getting it in London, do we? And things like that. So that was the start of Madonna, because we never heard the full record. Rock and roll as it really is, folks, let me tell you. But no, I had great times at WA because, meeting so many artists. I mean, with Foreigner, I met guys. At one time I'd worked with different members in different bands and things like that. It was great meeting Robert Plant again because Robert was there. And I think one of the two dinners that I remember most, because we did a lot of dinners in that stage.
Yes.
I'm sure the artists, the last thing they wanted to do was go out with a load of bozos from the record company
and tell hilarious stories to entertain.
I went to Mr. Chow's with George Harrison during the Wilburys period, and I'm sat there, and Rob said to me, he said, imagine when we were young, when we were carving the shadows onto our desks with our compasses and things, and the Beatles, and you'd sit here with a real live Beatle. Yeah, and it was true. He was lovely as well. And I had one of my favourite dinners was, and this, if it was Desert Island Discs, I'd have to take this.
Fabulous.
He's my favourite person I ever interviewed.
Oh my God, what a great guy. And what a great history.
This is Randy Newman, in case anybody didn't grasp that.
Oh my God. It was like, no, it was great.
He's the funniest. And also the great thing about Randy Newman, I always found, was he was interested in things other than Randy Newman, which doesn't
completely
apply to an awful lot of
unbelievably modest as well.
Yes.
I just wanted him to tell me all about his background and his uncle who'd done all the film music and everything like that. So so that was WEA, and then I was approached to go and run Chrysalis. And
at the time, can I interrupt?
Yes.
I'm sure you told me at the time, I've agreed to go as long as they call me El Presidente.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
that's right. I remember that correctly, haven't I?
I mean, before we leave WA, I've got to say I did bring Howard Jones in.
Oh, right. Okay.
And we had all the success in America. And one thing I forgot about Stiff is, of course, not many people you interview have been on sleeves of singles.
Were you on that? Is that Jonah Louie?
No, that's Just Water, Singing in the Rain. I know it was never off your turntable.
Oh, right. I think I got it somewhere.
You probably have. We picked it up from America. But there's me at WEA as well. We took a bus to Montreux. We had a conference in Montreux. And we got to Montreux, and Claude Nobbs said, "Why did you hire a bus in England? There's a red bus just round the corner." But there's another cracker from the WEA days.
Oh,
who's that?
It's Roy Rogers.
Exactly, boyhood hero.
Hell.
I've gone to Nashville to a conference, and I'm introduced to Roy Rogers and Dale Grace. Sadly, not Trigger, who I believe
is complete the picture. Yeah,
is stuffed somewhere. There's me misbehaving with Rod Stewart. You see, Jake would always say he knew I hated dressing up and doing all these things. And there's me with Nezui Ertegun and a well-known footballer.
Pele. Good grief. That is during the time of the New York Cosmos, is it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was explaining to him where he was going wrong in his career. So I then went to Chrysalis, and I was lucky enough to have, Sinead came in almost through the door. So we had an enormous worldwide hit, but worked with World Party, Waterboys, Debbie Harry, and of course a massive worldwide hit, Chesney Hawkes, of course, that I brought in. So, the one and only. So I had a few years there, and there's a whole debacle that went on at that time that Chrysalis sold to EMI. And I take some of the blame because when I went to Chrysalis, they were 50% owned by EMI and 50% owned by Chris Wright. And it became an impossible task to run the company being pulled from pillar to post. EMI wanted to save money, Chris Wright wanted to spend money, And so there's a long story there, which I don't want to bore your viewers with. But then eventually I got approached to go and run Virgin. And so...
this was roughly around the time the Spice Girls getting signed? Would this be?
This was 1992, 93.
Oh, just before that. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, well, we're getting into the Spice Girls.
The Verve, Chemical Brothers. Yeah.
So Richard was just selling the company. I felt really awkward. I never liked going to companies if I knew people there or felt as though I had, because I knew I'd have to streamline the company. And we thought that RCA were buying the company at the time. And in fact, it ended up as EMI. So having gone away from EMI, I'm back with EMI, aren't I, running Virgin. And Richard, God bless him, had, that's me signing to Virgin. Richard had, came into the dock there at Virgin and made a real sob story about how it broke his heart to sell the company and take whatever it was, 300 million. And I walked back to my office. I just started, and I thought, oh my God, I made the biggest mistake in my life coming here, because it's going to be a nightmare. But in fact, I had 10 absolutely fantastic years there. Massive Attack, Nena, Meatloaf, George Michael, The Stones, Lenny Kravitz, and Chemical Brothers. And basically what happened, because I know you want to get around to the Spice Girls. You only had me on so you could get to the Spice Girls. I know. Because,
hey, Chilli, I'm disappointed we didn't get more about Chilli Willi and the Red Hot Peppers. So that's all right.
Daryl Way was the reason we got you on, but no, go on.
Carry on.
Spice Girls.
This could have been a 4-part series. I mean, but anyway, so Tony Gordon, who managed Culture Club, came in one day, and he always used to try and get his royalties early. And he was doing all that. And then I said to him, have you seen anyone else recently? He said, I've seen this group of girls that are doing the rounds that are looking for their label and things. I don't think I'm going to get them. They're going to go with Simon Fuller. So I went up to the A&R department, to Ashley Newton, and said, have we heard about this group? And in fact, he said they had, and of course I believed him, and we got them in. And they came in and did a little performance with their cassette player and one thing or another, and they were just fantastic. The songs, they were honed. Now, you're talking about people who are driven. There's one thing about being a guy who's driven, women who are driven, and they were ready to rumble. And we had to beat off all sorts of other labels. We sent them to America because Simon was very much, and I'd worked with Simon with The Adventures many years earlier when they were signed to Elektra, and we'd had a small hit with them. And they signed to Virgin. And then after they'd signed to Virgin, it was like, oh my God, what do we do? So I remember Ashley and I sitting around thinking, girl groups, and everyone would say, girl groups don't sell albums, and you kept going, well, there's the Supremes, or you go, but we thought of Shampoo. Do you remember that group, Shampoo?
Oh, right.
I'm sure you wrote about them in Smash Hits. And
go on.
They broke out of Japan. And so actually we launched the Spice Girls, first of all, through Japan, because in those days we thought, well, it would be very cool, and you'd get a Japanese album come back with a bit of writing on it and things, and make it cool. I mean, they weren't a rock band, were they? So, but I have never, in all my years, known of anything like the Spice Girls in the sense of work and a pack of cards, everything going. I remember having dinner one night with my wife Katie and with Simon Fuller, and planning. And in the old days, I came through an era where things just like happened. So Jake would say, "Go out, do this," or Dave Robinson say, "Let's." I remember I mentioned to him that I'd seen that Grateful Dead had done a train tour of America. I said, "Wouldn't it be great to do a train tour in the UK?" And Dave said, "Let's just do it then, shall we?" And I was like, "Oh my God!" So I had to go to Nigel Dick and Andy Murray and say, "He's agreed to do it." So
go and book a train.
Yeah,
hire a train.
I know, which we did. And so therefore, you then got into the era now where everything was planned. You had hair and makeup, you had PR people, you had this person, that person, someone coming into so you had rooms full of people who. So I was now then running the company, and Ray Cooper, who was then, of course, you both knew and loved. He was doing all the marketing, and I think he was having more fun than I was then, because I was the one had to balance the ship and everything like that. But we took them to we used to do a charisma race day at Kempton Park. In honor of Strat, we used to have the Charisma Gold Cup. And
I went to one of those.
We took the girls down there, and they performed in front of Kathy Gilby, who did what was it called? Alive and Kicking, wasn't it? What was the kids program?
Oh, okay.
And she booked them for that. But we would do all and the first time the girls went out to do a promo tour, they were going out to do BBC Radio Oxford. And I came to the office in my usual early time, about 7:30 in the morning, and they were all getting coffees and getting in this van to go off and do promo. And they were so excited. And I said, in a few years' time, you'll hate me for asking you to do things like this. And they said, oh, no, we won't. No, we won't. We'll love it enough. And they did. Years later, they were just so exhausted because we had them coming back from Japan to go and do an MTV Awards show in Sweden or doing this and doing that. And, you know, they didn't know their feet to touch the ground. But unlike, they were so much better than guys. Because if you'd asked Madness to do that, right, God bless them, you know, Suggs would have missed the plane or something like that. You know, it was, but girl, you know, girl.
Well, do you remember them turning up at EMAP, Dave, and singing a cappella in the offices of the magazines?
Yeah,
and Smash Hits just said, look, we're really busy, we're trying to do some work, and sent them away. Can you imagine the shame? Came back cap in hand.
I think Jerry's got your number, Mark.
Yeah.
They were prepared to do that kind of thing, weren't they?
I know, that's the point.
Absolutely.
They'd do it.
Yeah. And everything I'd learned over the years from, you know, juggling things and particularly Madness, because they were like the gang, weren't they? It was the same thing. And then, of course, it was your old editor at Smash Hits, wasn't it? Who came up with Sporty, Ginger.
Actually, it wasn't. I think it was.
No, there's Peter Andre.
It
was Peter Andre. It was the editor of Top of the Pops magazine, I think.
Oh,
it wasn't called Peter Andre. I can't remember his name now, but he was Top of the Pops.
Not
anyway.
called Peter something,
anyway.
not Andre,
Yeah.
clearly. Peter something. Anyway, sorry.
Didn't he run off, go and do a jazz label and things? I think he went off to do. Anyway, don't worry.
I wouldn't know. I don't want to get that wrong. So, I mean, it always strikes me as remarkable that the Spice Girls, you know, that they were at the absolute top, and they kind of, they appear to me, when I look at this, they appear to me to have got out of it with their sanity intact and with a lot of money.
You can see the discs behind me there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's a great story. There's been no casualty in Spice Girls' story. They all look like they were, you know, it worked for them. They came out on top.
Yeah, I think so.
That's what it seems like. So, do you ever run into them nowadays?
The last time I ran into them was at the last set of shows they did? And for a short time, we managed Jerry and looked after her, Katie and I. But that is moving on for after I got sacked by Virgin, which was the only time I've been asked to leave a building other than a pub, you know, in my life.
Oh, dear.
And then I had to decide what to do. And we started Adventure.
Right.
And we put out records with Christine McVie and with Chris Difford. And we had a little rapper called Verbalicious, so we got to number 14, I think, at the time. And then it was Jonathan Dickens who mentioned to me about this song called Mad World.
Right.
And we picked up Mad World, and we got there it is here. Ivor Novello.
Oh, right.
Fantastic.
For the top selling single of 2003. But at that time, no one wanted to sign labels, did they? You know, if you were publishing or had something like that, maybe I was too old in the tooth, and maybe I didn't, you know, maybe within myself, I was thinking, I do want to have a little bit of money left in my old days, so I can talk to my old friends like Mark Ellen and Dave Hepworth on. In these difficult days, do you find it? Do you ever
reflect on this though? That it's, you know, it's obviously a young person's business and so forth, but there's a lot of people that you will still deal with or come across nowadays that you came across and dealt with 40 years ago. You know, it's just remarkable. It fascinates me. You mentioned Christine McVie. You know, so Christine McVie left Fleetwood Mac, didn't she? Made a solo record with you, and then went back to Fleetwood Mac
because she couldn't stand life. She had a spread down in Kent. She had a beautiful flat in London. She's a lovely lady, and I think it was like a lot of those acts, particularly the acts like Fleetwood Mac. You know, you'd say dry cleaning. You know, I'd like a strawberry daiquiri or something. You know, and they lived in hotels and they had everything done for themselves. So when they suddenly go back into the outside world and you're sat there, you know, just And they probably don't even look at their rumours, royalties and things like that, you know, because they don't need to, because they've got so much money. The funny one was Robert Plant many years ago. He used to come and sit in my office, and he'd always have a copy of Exchange and Mart with him because he was looking for a cheap car. You know? And you think, Robert, you know, what are you... Anyway, I think... we did this.
I can understand that, though. I interviewed Christine McVie around that time she put out that record, and in that flat you're talking about in Battersea, wonderful glass fronted flat up above the bridge, and I think she was just, you know, there was nothing happening in it. She was rattling around in a big house in the country, and she obviously was really frustrated that she enjoys
watching tennis. She's a big tennis fan.
Yeah.
So you probably got on quite well with her with all that, didn't you? Because you like to hit the racket, don't you?
I was a tennis.
It's more you, Dave.
It's Dave, really.
But no, it fascinates me that it's turned out with those people to be such a long-term career. It's the longest-term career of all. There
were no careers when we were young and we looked at bands, and you'd go and see Gnidrolog or T2 or
T2,
you know, Glenn Athens and the Trojans, who was one of my favourite bands. You know, I mean, what would you know? What are you going to do next week? You know, there was no planning in it. It was all haphazard, and you know, Bobby so and so's left the band, and we replaced him, and it all it just didn't it? You know.
Yeah.
But it's one of the few industries where even at the age of 70, you can still find employment, can't you? You can go out and play. You can reform the old band. You know. Oh, what's this? Yeah, I've got that. It's the Louis Armstrong box set. It's fantastic.
Now you talk about people who are driven. I went off after Adventure. I went to do some consultancy for Universal, and we did that, and we did box sets with Bert. It was fabulous. And we did the Dusty Springfield one and blah blah. But I went to Louis Armstrong's house in Queens. And there's a museum there, and it's fantastic, really good. And I mean, there's a man who obviously made money, was so many days on the road, and he couldn't get over the fact I don't know, his wife, his third wife or something, had bought the place in Queens, and he went back after touring somewhere, and he used to get the train out to Queens, and walked to this house, and he had to find out how to get there and everything. And he stayed there very few times because he was on the road all the time. You know, you go back to that era of jazz and dance bands; they were out all the time, weren't they?
Yeah.
But it was absolutely appallingly decorated as well.
Yes,
I
think it's still open to the public, I think.
Oh, it is.
I think
it's well worth the visit.
Yeah.
And I was scared, Richard, that we'd go out to Queens and get mugged and things. But it's quite, you know.
Because he used to come back from tours, and you will see photographs of Louis Armstrong quite late in life, just sitting there outside the place talking to the neighborhood children. Because he just lived in a kind of regular, he was most famous jazz star on earth. Yeah. But he was, you know, he lived in a regular neighborhood.
There's an example of a driven man. My God.
Well, he lived in a wonderful
started his life
world,
born pretty much in a brothel, wasn't he? I think.
Yeah,
he lived in a wonderful world, didn't he?
The kind of phrase. So, Paul.
Yes.
We traditionally finish these chats, and this has been remarkable because we've mentioned Chilli, Willi and the Red Hot Peppers, T2. Gnidrolog,
Daryl Weighs Wolf,
shampoo. Oh, it's been a joy because that's what this is all about. But we traditionally ask people to finish by telling us what is the greatest record ever made, and unless you've told us already, please answer that question.
Well, if this was Desert Island Discs, you'd let me have the Bible and Shakespeare, wouldn't you, or something? But I love this book.
Oh, Chet Flippo, okay, yeah, cheating on.
And I would take any of Hank Williams' singles,
okay,
if you would allow me to do that.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I did get out a selection of other albums that I love.
I can't see one.
Can't see what that is. Yeah. What's that one?
Carney.
Oh, right.
Leon Russell.
Oh,
yeah.
Carney. Okay, I don't know.
And I'd have to take that.
Lay
down easy.
Yeah.
I got it in twice.
we were having Mike Bat about that record.
Oh, that's a great record, Spooky Tooth.
And I love Procol Harum.
I love Procol Harum.
Yeah.
I saw them do 7 encores at the Fairfield Hall, Croydon, which was right, and that would have to come with me as well.
Okay, fine. But
you're a bit miffy about that, Dave. I didn't.
Not at all. Not at all.
I didn't get the feeling the excitement level was up.
Hank Williams, I'll grant you, definitely. I thought it was going to be the Thoughts of Emilis Daviak, because that surfaced at one point, and I haven't seen a vinyl copy of that for many a long year.
No, I got out some albums that. That's a favourite as well.
What's that? Jimmy Buffett.
Buffett.
Oh, a white.
As in Wasting Away in Margaritaville.
Yeah,
Me and this fading tattoo.
Coat, a pink crustacean.
Pink crustacean. Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, Georgie.
Oh, lovely.
Another one of my major influences.
Yeah.
And we really haven't talked about Caravan, but I think really, Mark, you and I should do a sub-program.
Yes.
Just on the land of Graham Pink.
In the land of Graham
I thought that would be the greatest
You and I
hits.
could do because Dave obviously has about as much interest in Caravan as I do in, the roadies of Three Dog Night or something.
That sounds like a novel, The Roadies of Three Dog Night.
Yeah. Before you do get rid of me, and I would love to go on for hours, can I just have a slightly serious thing to men and who may watch this? Unfortunately, I've had prostate cancer, and I've had my prostate out and blah, blah, blah. And so many of my friends in the music business of a certain age have this issue. And when we used to see all these things with football, with people with badges on and things like that saying, please, guys, have a PSA, check it out. Because, hopefully it's going to, by the fact I got mine done early, it will save my life. But, we all love music. We love this sort of thing. But sometimes these things do catch up with you. And both you two and I have lost lots of friends over the years to different things. Some being, but it's curable. So go for it. I don't want to leave on a miserable note. And
No, very good point.
I'm sorry.
Well made. Yeah.
I hope your sponsors will accept that.
Yeah, you will.
and you haven't had time to look at all of these. I've got millions of them.
Oh, right.
All my backstage passes. I've got thousands of them. I've got the back, my Get into Hurrahs in New York.
Oh,
do you remember Hurrahs?
Yeah, I never went.
I can't say I was ever there, but Dave was there most Tuesdays.
This is more you, Dave. I think. The venue.
Oh, yeah, I was there the opening night. It was very
There's
good.
my gold card.
Victoria.
Anyway.
Who were we talking
Fantastic.
to? Who were we talking to? We used to run the venue.
Oh, yeah. Who was it?
Oh.
But it was owned by Virgin, wasn't it?
He was a Daryl. He was a Daryl.
Mike Oldfield was there the opening night. I remember it vividly.
It was the weirdest place because they used to shunt us. Well, we spent most of our time, didn't we, at the back in that bar, up the back. And it had all these sort of barriers, didn't it?
Yeah.
So you looked at bands. I remember seeing James Brown there.
Yes.
Did you ever see James Brown?
I didn't go to that gig, but yeah, he did play there.
You haven't asked
Captain
me
Beefheart there.
You haven't asked me favourite gigs.
Go on.
Favourite gig? Go
on. I think George Jones at Hammersmith Odeon, who replaced Tammy Wynette because she was ill. And he came out and did a fabulous set. Steely Dan at the Rainbow.
Right.
Leon Russell at the Rainbow. Delbert McClinton in Nashville. Prince at the D'Orsay in Paris. Johnny Cash, I saw him in loads of places, but in Stockholm was great. Spooky Tooth and Joe Cocker at Croydon Art School. Oh,
fantastic!
What an evening that was! And Joe Cocker came down, and he still had his bus driver's coat on because he'd been a bus driver, hadn't he, in Sheffield?
Was he? I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's
He was a
brilliant.
bus driver. He had a badge.
What a magic combination. That's great.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.